Hello everybody, my name is Sean McDonald, and today I'd like to talk to you about one of the most interesting stories to ever come out of my research of the Second World War. Being a history buff, I love to learn about the war in any way that I can, be movies, video games, books, and even music. But this story was just so baffling to me that I didn't believe it the first time that I heard it, and that story is the Battle for Castle Itta. The Battle for Castle Itta is considered by many to be one of the strangest stories to ever come out of the Second World War. But before I can get to the story itself, I need to give you some background on the castle itself, the people who were in it, and how they were able to get two unlikely allies to come together to help them save the day. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the castle. The castle itself is a 13th century castle in the village of Itta in Tyrol, Austria. In 1940, according to Robert Lawson, a writer for the Encyclopedia Britannica, the castle was rented out by the German government and held on to for about 3 years, until in 1943 they gave all control of the castle over to the infamous concentration camp known as Dachau. The reason they gave it to Dachau is because they wanted to turn it into a prison for high-ranking political officials. The political officials they put in there were French VIPs, and they consisted of generals, premiers, those who opposed Nazism, and two of note were Charles de Gaulle's sister, and my personal favorite, a French tennis star who will become very important to this story later on. Now that we know the place and the people, now we need to talk about the events that led up to the battle. On May 2nd, 1945, the camp director at Dachau decided to commit suicide when he found out that the Americans were coming and were going to liberate the camp. When the warden at Castle Itta heard about this, he decided to take him and his men and leave, leaving the prisoners there by themselves. Now, most people would think, hey, the Germans are gone, we can escape, right? Well, that's wrong, because according to Bethany Bell, a writer for the BBC, there were anywhere from about 100 to 150 Waffen-SS troops in the surrounding forest around Castle Itta. The Waffen-SS are considered some of the most dangerous Nazis that ever existed. Literally, they will bleed Nazism and fight to it till the very end. So the castle prisoners were pretty much out of luck for trying to escape. So they decided to raid the armory and defend themselves as best they could. They had ammo and food, but they knew they could not last long against those trained killers. So they decided to ask for help. On May 3rd, 1945, they sent out their first plea for help with one Yugoslavian handyman named Zvonimir Kokovic. He was given a letter written in English and told to go find some support. He was able to find some American troops led by one Major John T. Kramers and his tank battalion. Problem was, Major Kramers was not allowed to go to the castle because he was out of his unit's jurisdiction, so he'd have to wait for authorization to go there. The people at the castle did not know if Kokovic had actually made it or not, so they decided to send out another plea for help on May the 4th, 1945, with one Andres Corbett. Corbett was put on a bike and sent to the city of Wargl, Austria, in hopes of finding some support. When he got there, however, he was met by a group of German Wehrmacht soldiers who were led by one Major Josef Gangl. The good thing about these guys was they weren't Waffen-SS, they were just part of the regular German army. And even better is these Germans had actually defected from the German army, as they did not follow the Waffen-SS fanatical dreams of murdering people and promoting Nazism. Gangl had led these men away and actually decided to join up with the Austrian resistance to fight against the Waffen-SS in the town. When he heard the plea from the people in the castle, he decided to do something about it, so he got his contacts from the Austrian resistance to get in contact with the Americans, and the Americans that were closest to him were led by one Captain Jack Lee of the American 12th Armored Division. He and Gangl were able to come together and devise a plan to go help the people inside the castle. The original plan was to take Lee, his men, Gangl, and his men, and 5 tanks and go help the people inside the castle. Problem was, there was a bridge that all 5 tanks were too big to get over, so they had to settle for only Gangl, his men, Lee, his men, and 1 tank. And according to Caleb Larson of the National Interest magazine, that tank happened to be Lee's own Besatin Jenny. When the 14 Americans, 10 Germans, and 1 tank rolled up to the castle, the French defenders were less than happy with what they had, but they took what they could get. Lee took his tank and put it into the main road to provide support to the main road. And he, Gangl, and a SS officer who actually defected and joined them in the castle tried to devise some type of strategy to help defend the castle against the impending invasion. The defenses were set up, the men were in position, all they had to do was wait. Unfortunately, they didn't have to wait long, because on May 5th, 1945, the SS decided to attack, and they came in force, firing at the castle and seeing how much resistance they were going to meet. The Waffen-SS had the numerical superiority, but the people in the castle had a castle that was high up and they could shoot from high up. That did not last long, however, because the Waffen-SS actually had an 88mm anti-tank gun ready to be used, and they started firing holes into the castle, and eventually they destroyed the tank. But the radio operator was able to get a message out that they needed support, and he was able to escape the tank before it blew up. Now that they were out of the tank, they were running pretty hot. They were pretty much out of luck for a while, and it got really bad when Gangl was shot by an SS sniper while trying to help protect a French VIP. Running low on ammo and morale, the people thought they were completely done for. When one, Jean Barota, the French tennis star that I mentioned earlier, volunteered to jump over the wall, run through the Waffen-SS fire, and make it to the American reinforcements and lead them here. Now, according to the editors of Encyclopedia Britannica, the man known as Jean Barota was known as the Bounding Basque because of his quick movements when playing tennis. And when he jumped over that wall, ran through the Waffen-SS fire, made it to the American reinforcements, and got back without a scratch, he really did earn that name of the Bounding Basque. He led the American troops in, the tanks took out all the Waffen-SS they could, and the day was won. By the end of the day, 100 Waffen-SS were taken prisoner, an unknown amount were killed, and the only friendly death was Gangl himself. He was later honored in the town of Wargol with a road named after him and a plaque commemorating him as a war hero. To end this story, I can only say that it is still one of the strangest I've ever heard. Americans and Germans coming together to fight in a medieval castle against other Germans to save some French prisoners. Sounds like something you'd hear in a weird video game or a book or some alternate history thing, but I think it's a pretty interesting story nonetheless. Although, for as minor as a battle as it was, according to Stephen Harding, the major editor for History.net, if any of those people had been killed, it would have changed history for France forever. To close off this speech, I would just like to say there's only one phrase that I believe fits it. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Thank you, and thank you for listening.